The sun was hot and the wind dry. Dust blew across the broken road, and the town square was full of people walking past each other. But in one quiet corner, almost no one looked. A small alien girl sat in the dirt, her body thin like sticks. Her skin pale and covered in bruises, her arms wrapped around her legs, and her head rested on her knees. She didn't cry anymore. Her tears had dried up days ago. Flies buzzed all around her, landing on her face, crawling across her lips. She didn't move to stop them. She didn't have the strength. Her stomach had stopped growling. It had given up just like her. Each breath she took was slower than the last. People passed by. Some gave her a glance, but most ignored her. She's still here. One merchant whispered to another, "She'll die soon." The other one said, "Better not get involved." They kept walking, carrying food in their bags. So much food. Yet not even a crumb for the girl in the dirt. A group of children walked past, laughing and playing. One boy threw a small pebble at her. It hit her arm, but she didn't flinch. Another girl laughed. "She looks like a dying bug." The children ran off, forgetting her like she was nothing above her. A poster on the wall said unity and peace for all races, but the flies didn't care. And neither did the people. Then something changed. A shadow moved across the ground, covering the girl's tiny form. She blinked slowly, thinking maybe. This was death finally coming for her. But death didn't kneel down, didn't smell like dry clothes and metal. A human man stood there, quiet, still, watching her. He had a tired face, rough beard, and clothes that were patched and dusty. In his hand was a small loaf of bread, not fresh, not warm, but still real food. He looked at it, then looked at the girl. She barely noticed him, her head tilted slightly. Her lips cracked. The man crouched down, placing the bread in front of her. "Eat," he said, softly. His voice was not kind, not cruel, just tired, but the word was simple, and she understood it. Her eyes looked at the bread, then at him. She didn't move. Her body didn't trust the moment. So many had walked by, so many had laughed, some had even kicked her. Was this another cruel trick? But the bread didn't move. The man didn't take it away. He just sat there, silent, letting her decide. Slowly, with shaking hands, she reached out. Her fingers trembled as they touched the dry surface of the bread. She pulled it toward her and took the smallest bite. Her mouth moved slowly, like it forgot how to chew. But when the taste hit her tongue, her body reacted. A sob escaped her lips. The first sound she had made in 2 days. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from memory. The taste reminded her of her mother, of warm hands and quiet songs, of times before the war, before she lost everything. The man said nothing. He just sat, watching. His own stomach growled once. Loudly, he placed a hand over it, as if to silence it. This was his only food, his last piece. But he didn't take it back. He let her finish, slowly, quietly, without pressure. Others stared from a distance. Is that crazy human feeding her? "He's wasting food on that thing," someone said. But no one came closer. No one stopped him. They just whispered and walked away. When the bread was gone, the girl looked up at him. Her lips parted, as if to say something, but no sound came out. Her voice had forgotten how to speak, but her eyes said everything. The man gave a small nod. "You're not garbage," he said, standing up slowly. "Not while I'm around." He turned and walked away. She watched him go, her eyes wide. She didn't know his name, and he didn't ask for hers. But in that short moment, something had changed inside her. She didn't feel warm, but she didn't feel completely cold anymore. She didn't feel full, but she didn't feel hollow either. She didn't feel like she was dying, not yet, as the man disappeared into the crowd. The flies came back. But this time, she brushed one away weakly. Just one, but it was a start. And for the first time in many days, she wanted to live again. The man walked slowly, his boots pressing into the dry dirt. His name was Ellis, just a worker in the outer zone. He had no home of his own, just a broken trailer on the edge of the scrapyard. Each day, he searched for metal parts, old wires, anything that could be sold. Life was not kind to him, but even in pain, he still had something left inside. Something others had forgotten. As he walked, his stomach twisted. He had not eaten in 2 days before he gave the bread to the girl. His hands shook slightly, and his lips were dry, but he didn't turn back. He didn't regret it. Fool, he muttered to himself, you'll starve just like her. But in his mind, her face stayed. Those wide, quiet eyes, full of pain, full of silent questions. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just sat there, waiting to disappear. And somehow, that made it worse. He had seen many beggars, many orphans, but this girl wasn't even asking. She had already accepted death, and that haunted him. Back at the scrapyard, Ellis climbed into his old trailer. The floor creaked, and the roof leaked when it rained. He sat down on a crate, pulling out a small bottle of water. Only a few sips remained. He looked at it, then put the cap back on. He might need it tomorrow or the next day. The night passed slow, and the hunger kept him awake. But it wasn't just the hunger, it was the silence. The kind of silence that sits heavy in your chest, like something unfinished. Something wrong. He closed his eyes, and her image returned again. Thin arms, broken skin, and a mouth too weak to speak. The bread had helped her, yes, but it wasn't enough. She needed more than food. She needed someone. When morning came, he didn't eat. He had nothing left anyway. He only drank one small sip from the bottle and walked back to town. People were already moving about, markets opening, machines humming. But Ellis didn't stop to greet anyone. He walked straight to the corner where he had found her. His heart beat faster with every step. What if she was gone? What if she died in the night, alone in the dust? But she was still there, barely. Her back was now against the wall, and her head leaned to the side. Her eyes were half closed. But when she saw him, they opened just a little more. He crouched beside her again. "I'm back," he said softly. She didn't answer, but her breathing grew a little faster. Maybe that meant something. Maybe she still believed someone cared. Ellis reached into his jacket and pulled out a rag. Inside was a piece of cold potato. Something he found behind a food stall. It wasn't much, but it was real. He held it out to her. She stared, blinked, then took it slowly. Her fingers were cleaner today, just a little. She had wiped her face with her sleeve. That small act made Ellis smile. It meant she still wanted to live. She hadn't given up completely. As she ate, Ellis looked around. People watched again, whispering like before, "She's still here," that humans feeding her again. Disgusting, he ignored them. He had made his choice. When the girl finished, she looked up at him. Her lips moved just barely. A faint sound came out, broken, dry. Why, it was one word, but it shook him. He exhaled and sat beside her. "Because you're still breathing," he said. "Because I've been where you are. Not alien, but still broken." She blinked again, as if trying to understand. "I had no one," he continued. "No family, no help, just cold nights and empty days. But one man gave me bread once," he said, voice low. "He didn't ask my name. He didn't wait for thanks. He just gave it and left. That's why I'm still alive." Silence stretched between them. But it wasn't cold. It was heavy, but warm, like a blanket around words not yet spoken. "I don't have much," Ellis said, "but I'll come back tomorrow, unless someone stops me." He added, looking around. His voice grew harder. "Let them try then." Slowly, carefully, he took off his jacket. He placed it around her shoulders. It was old, but warm. The girl's hands gripped it tightly. As if afraid it would vanish, she looked at him one last time, not with fear, not with hunger, but with something else, something like hope. And as Ellis stood and walked away once more, he knew the hunger would stay, the pain wouldn't fade. But inside him, something brighter had returned. A reason, because sometimes, the smallest act of choice to care can light a spark in the darkest place. The jacket was too big for her. Its sleeves hung past her hands, and the edges dragged in the dust, but she held it tightly, like it was a shield, like it was proof that someone had seen her, touched her, cared. She didn't know the man's name. She didn't know why he had come back, but she remembered the bread. She remembered the potato. She remembered the way he looked at her, not with fear, not with disgust, but like she mattered. Her body still felt weak. Her arms were sore, her lips cracked. But there was something new in her chest now, something soft, something stubborn. Hope. Maybe for days she had sat in the dirt, watching people walk past. Listening to cruel words and laughter, she had learned to be silent, still, invisible. But now, a seed had been planted inside her, and it wouldn't stop growing when the sun rose again. She stayed awake, before she would sleep through the heat, too tired to care. But this time, she waited. She waited for the man, her weak fingers clutched the jacket, her eyes scanning the crowd. Every human face looked the same at first. Until she saw him, he walked with a limp that day, his boots dragging slightly. But his eyes found her quickly, and he smiled. "I brought something better today," he said. Kneeling beside her from his worn bag, he pulled out a piece of fruit, an orange, half-ripe, slightly bruised. But her eyes widened the moment she saw it. She reached for it slowly, like it might disappear. He handed it over without a word. Her fingers trembled as she peeled the skin. Juice leaking down her wrist, she took one bite. Sweet, wet, cold. It was like a shock to her senses. She gasped, her eyes filled with tears. Not sadness, not pain, but something deeper. The taste reminded her of home, before the ships came, before the fire. Before her mother was taken, back when fruit grew in their garden and her little sister used to steal them and run away laughing. Ellis watched her eat. He didn't speak, didn't rush her, he just waited, letting her take her time. When she was done, she licked the juice from her fingers. And then, for the first time, she did something that surprised even herself. She smiled. It was small, weak, but it was real. Ellis saw it and let out a soft chuckle. "Well, look at that," he said. "Told you fruit's better than dry bread." She looked down at the ground, shy, then back at him. "Thank you." Her voice cracked like dry leaves, but it was a voice, and it carried more meaning than 1,000 perfect words. Ellis nodded. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Just keep fighting, all right? You're stronger than you think." She didn't know if that was true, but the fruit had given her energy. And his words gave her something else, a reason to sit up straighter. "Name?" she asked, her voice still dry. "Ellis," he said, with a gentle smile. She nodded slowly. He looked at her and tilted his head. "You got one?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Rinya." "Nice to meet you, Rinya," he said. "You planning on getting up from this dirt someday?" She looked down, then looked at her legs. They were still weak, still bruised, but she nodded. "One day," she said. Ellis smiled again. "Good. I'll be here, that day." He sat with her longer. He shared water with her. He told her simple stories about machines, scrap metal. How once a robot arm grabbed his pants and wouldn't let go. She giggled softly, covering her mouth like it was a secret. It was the first time she had laughed since the war. People passed by and stared. Some shook their heads, others rolled their eyes. But Ellis didn't care. Rinya didn't care either. They had found something stronger than cruelty. They had found company. As the sun dipped low, Ellis stood idle. "Come again tomorrow," he said. Rinya looked at him, then down at the dirt. She moved the jacket from her shoulders and gently placed it across her lap. "No," she whispered. "Come back." Every day, Ellis paused, surprised. Then he nodded. Every day, he promised. She watched him walk away again, but this time, she didn't feel the cold fear she used to feel. She didn't feel like she would disappear, because now she had a name, a friend, and the taste of fruit still on her lips, and somewhere deep inside, she knew. This was the beginning of something new, a second chance. Asterisk, the wind was colder today. Dust swirled around the empty square as people moved faster, not stopping, not talking. But Rinya didn't notice the chill as much now. She was sitting against the wall, her back straighter than before. The jacket still covered her legs, and her hands were tucked under it. She waited, eyes scanning the road for one familiar figure. And then she saw him. Ellis walked toward her with a slight limp, his bag hanging on one shoulder. He looked tired, more than yesterday. But when he saw her, he smiled. "You look better," he said, dropping to one knee beside her. "You're not lying in the dirt anymore." Rinya nodded slowly. "Because I'm not trash anymore," she whispered. Ellis's face changed. Not with anger, but sadness. "You never were," he said. "People just forgot how to see." He reached into his bag and pulled out 2 small buns, stolen from kindness or bought with pain. She didn't ask. He handed her one, and she took it with both hands. She didn't wait anymore. She ate carefully, but with hunger. Each bite was a step away from death. Each swallow was a quiet scream that said she wanted to live. They sat together in silence as she ate. Ellis leaned against the wall beside her. Legs stretched out, he didn't talk much, and neither did she. But something passed between them, something invisible. A quiet bond formed not by words, but by presence. Rinya finished her bun and looked at him. "Where do you live?" she asked softly. Ellis pointed toward the scrapyard. "Old trailer leaks when it rains." She tilted her head, confused. "You don't have a house?" He shook his head, smiling. "Had one once. Long time ago, before the mines closed." Rinya looked down. Then at the jacket around her legs. "Why? Give this to me." Ellis glanced at the people walking past them, none of whom slowed down, because I had 2 choices: keep walking or stop. I chose to stop. They sat in silence again, watching the crowd. Some people gave them sharp looks, others turned away. One tall man walked close and muttered, "Feeding strays now." Ellis didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead. Rinya watched his hands curl into fists, then relax again. After the man left, Rinya whispered, "They hate me." Ellis sighed. "They hate anything that reminds them they could do more." He looked at her. "Do you remember where you're from?" Rinya nodded. "Small village, trees, blue roofs, flowers on windows." Her voice faded. "Then ships came. Fire. Everyone ran. I lost Mama." Ellis said nothing. He didn't ask for more. He just sat closer. So their shoulders almost touched. That tiny space between them now felt like safety. No one had sat that close to her in months. A bird landed on a nearby rail, watching them. Rinya pointed at it. Smiling faintly, "Pretty," Ellis chuckled. "Even the birds stay away from this place. But not that one." The bird tilted its head, then flew off. Rinya sighed. "Free," she whispered. "One day," Ellis said. "Maybe you'll fly." "Too." She looked at him quickly. "I can't," she said, shaking her head. "I'm small. Broken, no wings." Ellis leaned back, looking at the sky. "I know someone who once told me you don't need wings to fly. Just a reason to lift yourself." Rinya didn't understand the whole sentence, but she liked how it sounded. Later, Ellis pulled out a small tin cup from his bag. It held clean water, and he handed it to her first. She took one sip, then offered it back. He shook his head. You need it more. But she insisted, pushing it toward him. They shared it, both drinking slowly. That small act made something tighten in Ellis's chest. He didn't know what to call it, but he hadn't felt it in years. As the sun dipped behind the buildings, Ellis stood, brushing dirt off his knees. Tomorrow, again? He asked. Rinya nodded, holding the jacket closer to her chest. Every day, she said. Ellis smiled. Then I'll bring something warm next time. Before he turned to go, Rinya reached out and gently touched his arm. It was just a tap. Soft, unsure, but to Ellis, it felt heavier than any weight he'd carried. Thank you, she whispered again, but this time, her voice didn't break. As he walked away, Rinya leaned back against the wall. The jacket kept her warm, the food kept her strong, but it was Ellis's silence, his company, that filled the emptiness inside her, in a world that turned its back on the broken, one quiet. Human had chosen to stay, and that choice, made without words, had changed everything. The morning started the same. Cold wind, dusty air, footsteps on broken stone. Rinya sat against the wall with Ellis's jacket wrapped tightly around her. Her eyes were tired, but not empty. She was waiting. And then she heard it, his steps. Steady, but soft. Ellis came into view, carrying his old bag and wearing the same patched coat. But this time, his face looked different. Tense, tired, maybe even angry. He knelt beside her without a smile. I brought soup, he said. Pulling out a small metal container wrapped in cloth, steam rose as he opened it. And the smell filled the air, salty, warm, full of small bits of vegetable and rice, Rinya's. Stomach growled loudly, but she hesitated. Ellis noticed. What's wrong? He asked. She didn't speak, only looked at the people nearby. They were staring more than usual. Some whispered behind covered mouths. Others didn't bother hiding it. Look at him, wasting food again. She's just a parasite. He should be ashamed. Rinya's hands trembled. She looked down, her voice soft. They hate you. Because of me. Ellis sighed and handed her the soup. Let them, he said. I've been hated before. She took the soup slowly and drank it. Tears in her eyes. Each sip warmed her throat, her chest, her frozen heart. But the whispers didn't stop. A woman passed by and muttered, You feed one alien and soon 10 will come. Ellis stood up suddenly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. She's not a disease, he said. She's a child. The woman rolled her eyes and walked away. Rinya lowered her head. You shouldn't help me anymore, she whispered. They'll hurt you. Ellis knelt again, his eyes serious. Do you want me to stop? She shook her head quickly. No, then I won't, he said. It doesn't matter what they say. He reached out and gently fixed her jacket, pulling it higher over her shoulders. You matter more than their words, but the town. Didn't forget, that afternoon, Ellis returned to the scrapyard, only to find his locker open and his tools missing. A note was scratched into the metal wall. Alien lover, his chest tightened. The tools were his only way to earn credits. Now they were gone. He stared at the empty locker for a long time. He didn't scream, he didn't cry, but the weight in his chest grew heavier. Back in the square, Rinya waited. Time passed, the sun dropped lower. But Ellis didn't come. Her hands gripped the jacket tighter, her mind filled with worry. Did they hurt him? Did he leave because of her? When the shadows grew long, she finally saw him. He walked slower than before, one arm hanging limp. He had a small bag with nothing but a water flask inside. Rinya stood barely and met him halfway. Her legs were weak, but she used the wall to steady herself. You're hurt, she said, her voice shaking. Ellis gave a tired smile. Lost my tools, he said. Some folks don't like kindness. She stared at him, tears filling her eyes. This is my fault, she whispered. No, he said, kneeling down again. This is the world's fault. He handed her the water. No food today, he said. I'll find some tomorrow, but she pushed the water back toward him. You drink, she said. He hesitated, then took a sip and handed it back. They shared it in silence, like always, that night. Ellis didn't return to his trailer. It had been broken into, his bedding soaked with oil, so he stayed in the square, sitting beside Rinya, with his back against the same wall. She leaned her head gently on his shoulder. I'm sorry, she whispered. He shook his head. Don't ever be sorry for needing help. The stars came out above them, and the city lights flickered. People passed, looked, whispered, but neither of them moved. They had chosen this place. This bond, this quiet battle. They were tired of hiding. Ellis closed his eyes and whispered, They want to break us, but they can't. Rinya looked up at the sky and whispered, They can't. And though the night was cold and the world around them cruel, they had something stronger than fear. They had each other. And that was enough to survive one more day. Asterisk, the night air was cold, but Rinya didn't feel it as much. She was awake, leaning against Ellis, wrapped in the old jacket and warmth that wasn't just from cloth. It came from something deeper, something growing slowly inside her. She looked up at him. His head rested back against the wall, his eyes closed, breathing soft. He looked older. In the dark, worn down but peaceful. She didn't want to disturb him, but her voice still came out. Ellis, she whispered. He opened his eyes, slow and calm. She hesitated, then asked, Why do you come back every day? He looked at the stars for a long time before answering. Because I want to. That's not an answer. She said softly. Ellis smiled. No, but it's true. Rinya looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of the jacket. I thought I would die here, she said. Alone, you didn't? He said, You're still here. Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them away. I didn't care before, but now. Now I don't want to disappear. Ellis turned his head to look at her. Good, he said, because I'm not letting you. In the morning, Ellis stood and stretched, joints popping. Let's walk, he said suddenly. Rinya blinked. Walk? Just a little, he said. You need to move, use your legs. She looked at her feet, thin and bruised. Then she looked at him, and slowly she nodded. Ellis reached out his hand. Rinya took it, her fingers fitting into his calloused palm. He helped her stand one step at a time. Her legs shook, and she leaned heavily on him. But she didn't fall. She walked, slow and clumsy. But each step was a victory. They didn't go far, just to the broken fountain nearby. It hadn't worked in years, but it still caught the morning light. Rinya sat on the edge, breathing hard, smiling. You walked, Ella said proudly. She nodded. Feels like flying. People stared again, but this time? Rinya looked back at them. She didn't lower her head. She didn't hide. Ellis sat beside her, sharing a stale biscuit he had traded a broken circuit for. They ate together, not as beggar and helper, but as something more. Later, Ellis took her to the scrapyard. It was loud and full of machines, but also full of hidden corners. He showed her a spot near his trailer, a little space under a rusted roof. Clean and dry, maybe not much, he said, but it's yours if you want it. Rinya looked around, touched the wall gently. It's warm, she said. Ellis smiled. Better than dirt, she laughed quietly. Much better. That night, Ellis found an old blanket and gave it to her. He slept on the floor beside her space, just outside. She felt safe for the first time in months. Truly safe, not just from hunger or cold, but from being forgotten in the days that followed. Rinya's strength grew. She learned to stand without help. She walked to the fountain every morning. Ellis taught her how to wash with rainwater. How to find food scraps that weren't spoiled. He gave her a small brush to clean her hair. You're not just surviving now, he said one day, you're living. She smiled and looked at her hands. I want to live better. Together, they cleaned up the space near the trailer. They found old metal sheets and made a small wall. They gathered boxes and made shelves. Rinya even found a cracked mirror and placed it on the wall. She stared at her reflection. Her cheeks were fuller, her eyes brighter. She was still small, still tired, but she didn't look like the girl who waited to die in the dirt. And the whispers began to change. Some still glared at them, but others started to soften. One merchant quietly left 2 apples near the fountain one day. Another dropped off a blanket without speaking. Small things, but important. Ellis didn't trust kindness from crowds. Rinya did. She believed hearts could change, because hers had. One evening, she sat beside Ellis, looking at the sky. You saved me, she said. Ellis shook his head. You saved yourself? No, she whispered. You gave me the reason. He looked at her and smiled. Then, maybe, you'll give someone else a reason someday. Hope, once dead inside her, now lived in her eyes. Hope that grew not from words, but from actions, from shared silence, shared food, shared pain. In a world full of noise and cruelty, 2 souls had found quiet, and in that quiet, something beautiful had begun. The sun was rising slow, painting soft orange light across the rooftops. Rinya stood at the edge of the scrapyard. Her thin arms wrapped around Ellis's jacket. She watched the sky change, felt the wind on her face, and listened to the silence. Before the machine started grinding again, it was quiet, peaceful, and full of promise behind her. Ellis yawned and stretched his back, groaning like old wood. You're up early, he said, rubbing his eyes. I like the morning, she replied, smiling. It feels kind. Ellis laughed gently. Not a word I usually hear for this place. But for Rinya, even the scrapyard looked different now. It wasn't ugly anymore. Not when it had saved her. She looked at Ellis, standing beside a pile of broken parts. His clothes were still torn, his boots still worn thin, but to her, he looked tall, strong, almost like a guardian from the old stories. That day, Rinya followed Ellis to the market square. She walked on her own, slow but steady, heads turned when they saw her standing, dressed, alive. Some people frowned, others looked away, but some smiled, even if only a little. A child passed by and whispered to her mother, "Is that the dying girl?" The mother nodded slowly. Yes, but she's not dying anymore. Ellis bought some bread using a few old bolts he traded. He handed half to Rinya, and they sat on the edge of the fountain. She bit into it and closed her eyes. Even plain food tasted better now. She wasn't just eating to stay alive. She was eating because she was living. Later, a man approached them, tall, dressed in brown work clothes. He looked at Ellis, then at Rinya. I saw what they did to your trailer, he said quietly. Ellis nodded, not expecting more. But the man placed something in Ellis's hand, a small folded note and 2 metal tokens. Come to the supply yard, the man said. I need someone. Honest. Ellis blinked in surprise. Why me? The man looked at Rinya, then back at Ellis. Because you fed someone, everyone else left to die. That's the kind of man I want nearby. When the man walked away, Ellis stared at the tokens. Rinya leaned over. Curious work. Ellis nodded slowly. Work. That afternoon, they returned to the scrapyard and cleaned the little space together. Rinya found some old fabric and made a pillow from it. Ellis used scrap wood to build a box for her things, small treasures. Like a broken mirror, a shiny gear, a smooth stone shaped like a heart. They didn't have much, but everything they had built together. As the sun lowered again, they sat side by side, watching shadows stretch across the metal. Rinya leaned her head on Ellis's shoulder. You're my family now, she said softly. Ellis's throat tightened. He placed a hand gently on her head. And you're mine. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly. For so long, She had thought no one would ever care again, but one human man had changed that. Not with power, not with money, just with presence, kindness, and sacrifice. That night, she dreamed of her old home, but this time, the dream didn't end in fire. This time, she saw Ellis standing there, arms open. He didn't replace what she lost, but he helped her carry the pain and gave her something new. A few days later, Rinya stood in the square while Ellis worked at the supply yard. She didn't sit in the dirt anymore. She stood near the fountain, helping an older woman carry a sack of food to her stall. The woman patted her arm gently. "Thank you, child," she said. "You're very kind," Rinya smiled. She had been invisible once. Now people saw her, now she had value. Not because of pity, but because she had shown strength. When Ellis returned that evening, Rinya ran to greet him. Not fast, not strong, but smiling. She held up 2 apples. "Someone gave these to me," she said, proud. For helping, Ellis took one and laughed. "Looks like you're feeding." "Me now?" Rinya nodded. "My turn." They sat together and ate as the stars appeared above them. Rinya looked up and whispered, "I want to help others like you helped me." Ellis looked at her and nodded. "Then you'll shine brighter than I ever could." And in that broken world, where cruelty still lived and hunger still walked the streets, a little girl and a tired man proved something beautiful. That humanity didn't need perfection, it only needed heart. The flies had once swarmed around her. Now she swarmed the sky with dreams, with light, and at the center of it, all was one human who gave up his only food and gave her back her life.